From objectives to materials. This presentation was first given to the security course development team in IBM. It is presented here in the hope that it would be useful, but without any promises expressed or implied, and as something that I, Ori Pomerantz, do rather than as an official IBM publication. Objectives. When you complete this presentation, you should be able to do two things. First, given objectives, which you learned to create in the previous presentation, you should be able to write lab exercises that would teach those objectives. Also, given objectives and the lab exercises, you should be able to write lecture material that would prepare people to do the labs. Once they do the labs, the lab exercises, they should know the objectives. Note the order, by the way. The lab exercises are first for two reasons. Number one is that it is usually easier and more efficient to do them first and only then write the lecture materials. Number two is that the lab exercises are really more important in most cases. Lecture material people see and hear, but they are more likely to remember things based on the lab exercises that they actually do. Where were we? To recap for a moment, let's think about objectives. As you know, you get the top level objectives from curriculum design or simply because you see a problem, and the intermediate objectives from task analysis. You see what you need to achieve the top level objective and you divide that into tasks. Our objectives look like this: do X. So how are we going to get from here, where we start, to the point where the students can do X, we know they can do X, and they know that they can do X? The answer is quite simple. We make them do X, whatever it is. How do we make them do it? Usually we configure one or more virtual machines, and their starting state would be similar to what students would encounter on their own systems. We provide them with very detailed instructions exactly what they need to do. The starting state is somewhat similar to the performance context, the system that the customer uses in real life. However, it is not exactly the same. It is significantly simplified. For example, unless our objective is specifically to teach how to do something with redundancy, we don't have redundancy because this is not production ready. It doesn't need high availability, it doesn't need high performance. Also, unless installing the software is part of the objective, we don't make the students worry about that. It comes with the software already installed. We need to create instructions to create the starting state, and those instructions go in the setup guide, which we write in FrameMaker. Also, before you start the exercises, you should take a snapshot so it would be possible to revert to it if something goes wrong, if somebody makes a mistake, if somebody is just too confused to do anything. There are several reasons why it is important for the instructions to be as detailed as possible. During class, we may have an instructor who is not an expert on the product that they teach. Also, imagine that we have one instructor and 12 students. The instructor can't help everybody at the same time. Another and more important reason is what happens after class. Imagine that it's been 6 months, the students forgot 90% of what they learned because they haven't used it. Now suddenly they need to repeat one of the procedures. They need to refresh their memory. The easiest way is to look at the student exercises and see what they did. Of course, this only works if it actually shows them what they did in great detail. We write instructions in the imperative as an order. For example, type object 00 and then click OK. We also include screen captures for clarity. We put sanity checks in the instructions because if anybody makes a mistake, we don't want them to see it 5 exercises later when they would be way behind on the class. We want them to see it as soon as possible so they can fix it. And instructions go in the student exercises booklet, which we write in FrameMaker. This is an example of what our instructions look like. The items that need to be clicked, selected, or typed are all in bold. The reason is to allow students to just scan the sentence, see exactly what they need, and click on it. Also, in the bottom, you can see a sanity check screen capture that allows the students to compare what's in the book with what they see and make sure that everything is working okay. After we write the exercises, the next step is to prepare the lectures. Why? Because we need to teach concepts that are necessary to understand the labs and to create the mental scaffolding that is required to understand those concepts. Also, it gives us a place to put the overall process so the students can put their labs in context and the rationale for various things. Okay, we do it, but why do we do it? For example, let's take this class. Our terminal objective is to write classes. One of the intermediate objectives could be create lecture material in PowerPoint, and to teach that we will have a lab exercise that would make you create a specific 5-slide presentation. Slide? What's that? Slide is an example of one of the concepts that you need to understand to be able to do the lab. Of course, we all know what a PowerPoint slide is, but imagine that we have an instructor who is a time traveler from the 1970s. So what we would do is we would tell them to be a course developer, you need to write slides, and slides are like what you'd write on a whiteboard. If they don't know what that is, tell them a whiteboard is like a blackboard except with less chalk dust. And when they ask you why do we need to write slides, you would explain to them that the slides we write are easier to show than it would be to write something on a board. So, what are the deliverables that we create for our lecture material? First, we create PowerPoint slides. They're shown by the instructor, of course, not using this kind of projector, using a projector connected to a computer. They explain the main concepts, and usually the text in them is sentence fragments. You don't need to put a complete sentence. It is not text that somebody is supposed to read as normal text. It's just supposed to be the highlights. Then we have notes that go in the student guide, which we write in FrameMaker, that are used again to help remember the material. After 6 months, they've forgotten most of it. And for those, we use full sentences and paragraphs. Usually we write in the third person. After the user clicks OK, the browser submits the web form to the server. The server then creates blah, 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 etc., etc. We need to divide the material into units or sections or lessons or chapters, whichever way we call it. Why? First, when people see the table of content, it provides them with the initial scaffolding. If to do X, which is the reason they came to class, they need to do A, B, and C, then telling them Unit 1 will teach you how to do A, Unit 2 will teach you how to do B, Unit 3 will teach you how to do C, provides them with that scaffolding, that initial information. Also, finishing a unit gives students a feeling of progress, and it allows us to make more modular material. For example, maybe there is somebody who already knows how to do A and C, so they know they only need Unit 2. Maybe while you're teaching Unit 1, they do something else, or maybe it's self-enablement material and they can just skip it and focus on what they care about. Remember, this isn't university where the instructor sets the curriculum. Our students are customers. We do what they want, not what we want. Ideally, a unit should take about 1 or 2 hours. This is for the lecture and the exercises. And again, this is best practices. Some units logically take less time. Sometimes it makes sense to have a unit that would be longer, but try not to have a unit that would be more than half a day of instruction, and certainly not one that would be more than one full day. That is just too much. So, what did you gain from listening to this presentation? Hopefully now, if we give you objectives, you'll be able to write the lab exercises to teach them. And if you have the objectives and the lab exercises, either because we gave them to you or because you've just written the lab exercises, of course you have them, you'll be able to write the lecture material to prepare people to do the lab, which will then teach them the objectives.